Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. I have a very exciting guest for you tonight, and it's Sue Belton. Welcome, Sue.
Welcome. Good evening, Jane. Good evening.
Yeah, great to have you here, Sue. Now, Sue is an amazing coach. She's got a great story to tell. She and I share some history because she was actually a producer at the BBC in the documentary department. And I also have a history in media and entertainment, and specifically TV, although what we did was actually create title sequences and eventually corporate identities for television companies. So we've had a great chat beforehand about the world of TV, and we're going to go back there later. But first of all, I just wanted to really get into it, this whole business of coaching, because Sue is somebody who has made a multiple six-figure business from her coaching skills. And it's not easy at the moment to be a very profitable and successful coach. So we're really going to get into that, hear about Sue's story, and hear about how she actually built her business to where it is now. So, Sue, take it away. Love to hear all about how did it all start for you?
It all started 13 years ago, and very long story short, for the sake of you, I was in a very bad way. I had my daughter, she was 2 years old. I'd taken maternity leave. I'd had an awful return to work, was signed off with anxiety, postnatal depression. I was in a relationship that was really floundering and struggling under the pressures. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was in that typical stuck place that a lot of my private clients are, some of my corporate clients, of, I was in a life that I'd built for myself that no longer worked for me. So a very bit of a hopeless place, really. Yeah. And I had unfortunately, I had a random meeting with another ex-BBC producer turned coach. And from that, I thought, this sounds interesting. And, classic journalist researcher, I looked into it. And I had my first coaching session ever in my life. I was super cynical, one of those super cynical consumer journalists. But within that I was typical. Within that 45-minute session, my coach, Judy, who became my first ever coach, now a dear friend, took me from a place of absolute desperation and hopelessness to one of feeling, actually, I can do something about this. And I had some actions to take away. And I did. And I literally got myself, that was the first step towards getting myself out of the hole. We have a dog. Is that your dog?
So sorry. Yes, I'm going to shut the door now because he's a very annoying dog. Just stop it. Right. I do apologize. That's one of the issues with going live, unfortunately, is the interruption by the dog. And what you said, Sue, it resonated with me so much because I come from that environment. I know how tough it is. If you're, say, a high-flying professional woman in media, it's a very, very painful place to be at times because it's a very unforgiving environment. And I think people who are on the outside, maybe they work in the public sector or whatever, they have no idea the expectations that are heaped upon your shoulders, and how difficult that can be when you become a mother.
I mean, Jane, you talk about it, and it's true. I mean, I remember being 5 months pregnant and being told by my series producer, a woman, because she'd done it, to go out and self-shoot. I was in a pub filming with a camera at midnight, up at 6 a.m. the next morning, filming for a wedding. I ended up in A&E, and the doctor, when I told the doctor what I'd been doing, he was incredulous. It's hardcore. TV was hardcore.
It's hardcore. Okay. I mean, I've got a story to top that. So I was on a yacht in Cannes because we used to do this twice a year to, meet all our international clients. And I was expressing milk, and I had a machine, and I had to go below deck so that all my milk didn't dry up. And I was like, you know, entertaining clients from breakfast until like 11 o'clock at night and expressing milk and disappearing from time to time just so that it didn't dry up. So that is the life of a lot of women in TV that people just don't realize. It's brutal, isn't it? Absolutely brutal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's great to escape that, isn't it? Isn't it a good feeling? Yeah, you know, just great.
I would say yes and, Jane, because I mean, the thing that I loved about TV was, you know, when I look back at it, was the creativity. I loved making stuff. I loved making programs, and the people were fabulous, like so dynamic, you know, and we had a good time, you know.
Yeah.
Good times.
That's what it's all about. It's all about creativity, fun, good times, and being around like-minded, fun, happening people. And that's why it's kind of addictive. It's addictive, but it's also difficult. And in that kind of environment, it's also, I mean, you alluded to your relationship with your ex, is it? Or are you still, okay, your ex, yeah. So I think what happens with us women in that kind of environment is that we're so exhausted and drained often by the demands of the job that we almost, it's quite hard, you know, actually to focus on ourselves and on our own needs and our need for a loving relationship, a genuinely loving relationship and a supportive one. And, you know, of course, the divorce rate in all media careers is very, very high. So I'm guessing that, that's something, is that something that happened to you as well?
Yeah. And we're very good friends now, which is wonderful.
That's great.
And I mean, And
yeah. Okay. Well, let's get into this whole coaching thing then, Sue. So you started looking into this and you thought, you know, this could be really interesting. Maybe this could be a way out of some of the challenges that I'm facing. And, you know, it is very common, I think, for if we've been in that kind of environment that where the rules and the timescales and the pressures and so on are dictated by somebody else, some option that actually looks as though we can, for the first time, we can actually, you know, control our destiny and live the lives of that we've always wanted and planned for, and you know, choose our hours and all of those things is very seductive, isn't it? Was it plain sailing right from the start?
Oh, God, no. I mean, I come from a background. My dad was in the army and in the council. So I come from a background and I'd been conditioned to think you've got to have a stable income. You know, so I hadn't even dared be a freelance producer because I wanted that stable income. I needed that stable income. So for me, it was a real challenge. I'd never run a business before. I had no running a business experience. I was training to, you know, in a whole new skill set at the same time. In amongst this, I remember that's when I left my daughter's dad. So I ended up running my business for 10 months out of a friend's spare bedroom with my daughter in it. You know, all of these things, it all adds to the richness. You know, it's a real tumultuous journey, but I know most people's beginnings are. And for me, in all of that, it was like, there was no, and this was 2008 as well. So
oh, right.
2008.
Challenging time, yeah.
Challenging time, but for me, it was like failure wasn't a possibility. And I think there is a power to be had. It's not comfortable, but I think there is a power to be had when you don't have a safety net. I work with I mentor so many coaches who transition from corporate life to running their own business, and they're waiting for this magic time of having the money, having the security. And I think it can be easier for those that don't have to make that transition, because it's like sink or swim. This has got to work. Actually, it's got to work. And that was my attitude. For me, it just has to work.
Yes.
You know, this has to work.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting point, because there wasn't a plan B, right? You know, and I do talk to people about this as well, that, you know, if you're committed to your plan A, then you have to find a way to make it work, because because, you know, plan B is really accepting defeat, isn't it? So I think plan A is good.
Yeah, it's your perspective. If you go thinking, I started working with a new coach recently, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to give it 6 months, and if it's not worked in 6 months," I was like, "Mental hat on, not coaching. You got to be all in, and not be thinking in 6 months' time it's not going to work. All in."
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think that applies to all entrepreneurs and all entrepreneurial journeys, that really failure is not an option, because if you go into it, and as you said, with that mindset and actually thinking, yeah, I'll give it a go, then of course it is, you in a way you put a timestamp on it, don't you?
Yeah.
And that is not helpful.
Yeah, and it's not only that thing, it is that, you know, I'm a real believer in quantum physics. You know, it's not all woo-woo. It's when you make that decision, you make that commitment, and you go, this is where I'm going, all sorts of things start popping in and lining up as well.
Mm.
And that's not going to happen if you go, oh, I'm going to give it some money.
Yeah. So tell us, where did it go from there then, Sue? You were staying in a bedroom in a friend's house with your daughter, and you'd left your partner, and you were in this very unstable situation, having exited a corporate career, and you had nothing to fall back on. You had no plan B. So what happened next?
Well, what happened next is I just worked it. You know, I marketed, I put the message out, I really coached my ass off, basically. You know, I coached anyone and everyone in those early days. I wish I'd have known about niching earlier on, you know, really defining your target market. I highly recommend that. It makes everything easier. But I really just lived and breathed it. You know, I was going through my own process, which I think is absolutely essential for any coach, anyone, to walk their talk and really be doing their own work. I think that's essential. And I loved it, and I was passionate about it, and I believed it. So I would pick up clients at bus stops, in bars, you know, really. And yeah, so that was the start. And then about 3 years in, I was absolutely exhausted, because I had just clients coming out of my ears, and too many.
Yeah.
And that is when I really looked at my fears, my doubts, my limiting beliefs around doing corporate work.
Yeah.
I didn't feel I was good enough. I was corporate enough. I was not, you know, whole imposter syndrome going on. And when I worked through that and I got my first corporate client 3 years in, that was a real shift for me.
Yeah.
And that changed things for me a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And was there anything that made that that made that shift, or that catalyst? Was it something that somebody said to you, or was it something that you stumbled across, or was it a decision that you made? What actually made you make that transition?
It was a mixture of a desire to do it, an interest, a curiosity. I love intellectualized conversation, so I knew that could be a place where there were people who were like that. You know, I miss the TV guys, really bright, really smart. So it was a curiosity. And again, I've had a real thing. I really believe in doing my own work. So this is a fear. This is something holding me back. I'm going to work through it. So I worked through it with my own coach, and got the mentoring I needed to learn how to get clients in corporate industry, you know, corporate arena. So all of that.
Yes. So how important would you say is it to have your own coach as a coach? And has that been really instrumental? Sue, I'm going to leave you to this, because I'm just going to go and lock my dog in the living room downstairs, because he is being so annoying. So I'm going to let you carry on while I do that, talking about whether it's important to have your own coach. Bear with me, please.
I will. Bear with. Yeah. So hello, everyone. So it's funny. Like I just said before, I think it's absolutely essential. If you are a coach, and I say to anybody who's thinking of hiring a coach, ask this person what work they are doing on themselves, because as a coach, you can only take people where you've been yourself. So unless you're doing your own work, you will not be able to hold people in theirs. You will not be able to look at things, challenge things, really be deeply with things. And also, I would say, if you're not getting coaching, where's your belief in coaching? What has you not have a coach? I would be super curious about that. Hi, Jane.
Yeah, hopefully we've sorted him now. Yeah.
So I just shared that I think is absolutely essential in terms of doing your own work, walking your talk, and then doing that for your clients.
Yeah. So have you had the same coach yourself from day one, or have you found that as time goes on that you've needed different things and you've found different people? How's it worked for you?
Yeah, no, I've had several. And I think if you're having coaching, if you are being coached at a good level in a good way, you should naturally grow out of your coach maybe and that could be 6 months or that could be 5 years.
Yeah.
But you naturally evolve. You do become more conscious. Your levels of consciousness raise, unless actually, I had one coach for a long time because she was so within my range as I grew and developed. She really could hold me in that.
Yes.
Or if you have a coach that's doing their own work at the same time, they're going to be evolving and they'll take you with them as well.
Yes.
And you'll be able to feel that and know that and tell that.
Yeah. So in terms of your skill set, I mean, you talked about marketing, and of course you weren't a marketer, you were a producer, weren't you, when you first started your career, your new career? So how did you actually learn the skills of marketing, and have your marketing skills evolved as time goes on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got a mentor. I got a business mentor because I didn't know how to market. A lot was intuitive and you pick up and that, but I didn't know it, so I found someone who did, and I learned. And I read, and I actioned, and I've done various pieces of marketing, worked with various people over the years, and got what I needed at the time.
Yes.
For me, I would say, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is the gap for me, and I'm constantly evolving over the past. I'm constantly evolving. In terms of where my focus is. So my marketing needs to evolve with that.
Yes, that's right. And of course, that is where a lot of coaches do get stuck, isn't it? So do you find, if you work with other coaches, that you help them a lot with their marketing as well as perhaps their mindset and their skill set as well?
Oh God, yeah. No, I call myself a mentor coach. I work with a lot of coaches through their ICF accreditation.
Yeah.
And we're doing the mentoring in terms of their business growth, mastering the art of coaching, but also working on their self-belief is a main core area. But absolutely talking about the product ecosystem, how to funnel clients through, how to market clients, having a marketing plan and all the structures they need, the foundational, but also the programs and all of those pieces as well.
Yeah. So important, isn't it? So who is your typical client then at the moment, Sue? I mean, who do you mostly serve?
I have 3 core client groups. So within corporate organizations, I work with like the rising stars, senior leaders who are technically excellent, but have and done great to this point, but they tend to have poor work-life balance. So lots of stress, anxiety, working all hours. They tend to be still attached in the doing because they are so technically excellent. And also they might need to learn a few emotional intelligence skills such as empathy, difficult conversations, emotional regulation and managing their emotions. So I work with them to become more visionary, strategic, really reduce their stress levels dramatically. So we do a lot of mindfulness work, well-being work, and then training them in terms of emotional intelligence. So that's my corporate. Do you want me to go through my other 2 in that detail? Because I've got 2 other main clients, but it feels like
Yeah, I would be really interested. But before we go on to that, Sue, who do you get hired by? Would it be the individuals themselves, or would it actually be the organisation?
It's typically the organisation. So I work with really large organisations like Generali Insurance, Costain Group,
Yeah,
large organisations, and I also work with SMEs.
yeah,
So larger ones, it's the HR directors. Sometimes it's a senior leader who's been
yeah.
referred by another senior leader, their mate or somebody they know. And for SMEs, it is usually the founders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Okay, love to hear about your other customers. Yeah, the other
Yeah,
customers so far.
so my other two are private clients, midlife, like I was, super high achievers, type A personalities at that point in their life where they're like, oh, I've lost my mojo. What's it all about? Is this all there is?
Mm-hmm.
So we work together to really clarify what they want next in their life, usually work on imposter syndrome. Self-belief is a core piece within that, and work-life balance. So they're my private clients. And then my third group of people that I work with is, as we've discussed, coaches. So coaches typically transitioning from corporate, going through ICF accreditation and building a business from scratch. So I love working with them. So they're people like I was, who had never run a business in their lives, didn't know their arse from their elbow like I didn't. And then I also work with, coaches who are like a year, 2 years in, and they're just not getting to where they want to get to.
Yes, yes. So do you find that those types of coaches, what is it that's holding them back or making them stuck in terms of their progress?
Yeah, I would say money mindset. So really not believing people will pay, really not owning their value, owning all of the experience and who they are already.
Yes.
Plus the coaching skills on top, but what they come to me and they're not owning who they are.
Yeah.
And they just don't know how to run a business.
Yeah.
Like, why would they?
Yes. Why would they? Yes. If they, as you said, if they've come from a corporate environment, then it's, you've got to learn that stuff from scratch, right?
Yeah, and the big shocker for most of them, because I do a monthly mentoring call for coaches going through my coactive training, coaching school training, and the biggest shock is when I say, I still spend 2 days out of 5 on business development.
Yeah.
And they're shocked, and they never thought about that piece, because you are becoming an entrepreneur, a business owner, as well as a coach.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest shock that most people have when they're starting out. How much is the business?
Yes.
That's the piece. And a lot of training schools haven't equipped them with that. Yeah. So that's usually the gap.
So do you find that most of the coaches that you work with, they've actually done some accreditation? Because I know you mentioned ICF, and for people who don't know what that is, because as I said, I have some coaches in my audience, but I have a lot of small business owners. I have property people. I have all sorts of different people. So what is ICF? And
it's the International Coach Federation.
Yeah.
So one of 3 main recognized credentialing organizations in the world. Yeah.
Yes.
So they have a particular standard of training and number of hours that you have to do and to renew. Yeah. Very rigorous.
Yes, yes. So do you find that you're working with people who are coming through that program, or they're taking professional training on the whole? So they will have invested in their skills, won't they? But they just have to monetize. And so
they'll invest in the coaching skills, but there is a huge gap in terms of running the business.
Yeah. So you don't find that training or the coaching training now is actually equipping coaches with the skills to actually run a business and monetize to the level that they want? Would you say
lots aren't, or I would say the level they need.
Right. Yes. Yes. Okay. Now we've got some comments here. So Richard is saying sometimes because you temporarily run out of disposable spare income. I had 3 coaches, now want 2 more, but I haven't have those funds. Okay, he spent 25,000 on personal development. Okay, okay, right. So not getting results, I think, is really what Richard is saying, that he spent 25,000 on personal development and coaching, and then he ran out of money and he didn't get the results. So how, if somebody comes to you and says, well, how do I know it's going to work, Sue? How do I know it's going to get results? How do you actually convince people that making an investment in you or in your services is worthwhile and it is going to work where maybe perhaps other programs have failed them?
Yeah, well, it's difficult because I'm dealing with this secondhand, but I would always be curious about that comment, it hasn't worked, and what had it not worked? Because I actually had a conversation with someone, a potential client today, and the important thing about coaching is it's you that puts in the work in between the sessions. So when I work with someone, we'll disrupt a behavioral way of being or a mindset, and then it's up to the client to then go and implement and action the work. So it's difficult when it's secondhand, but I'll try and answer it. So it depends what's been promised, I guess, because there's lots of people or lots of versions of what a coach is. So, but the way I work is we design a plan of action with specific measurable goals. We check in and we're making sure those targets are being hit. So I would be curious if there is a theme of coaching not working as to what has caused that or what has made that happen. Yeah, I'd be really curious about that and what the results were.
So, I mean, I think that there are...
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that there are some pockets, shall we say, of the training industry where, you know, which is more like the kind of get rich quick type, you know, promises where people, they're just shown the Ferraris and they're shown the stats and they're shown all the kind of, look, if you sign up with me, you can have all of this too. Yeah. And actually all the effort and all of the focus goes into really just landing the clients and getting that money in the bank, as opposed to actually serving them. And I do think that that is sometimes an issue. Have you found that, or what's your view on that?
Yeah, no, I've had no experience of that. I'm very fortunate that I am part of a coach training school and community that is ICF accredited. And so I would always do massive due diligence. Remember, I'm a consumer journalist in the background.
Right, yeah.
So I would do real due diligence. I would always recommend you speak to 3 coaches. I would check them out, really check them out. And if you have got an intuition or a concern, trust your gut, firstly. But I would do massive due diligence, and I would check out their credentials. And I would check out their testimonials. I would check them out like I would check out anyone online now.
Yeah.
And check reviews and check for any bad reviews. And I would be curious if that person would tap in. What was one of the promises that was not delivered? I'd be curious about that as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I, you know, you made an important point about in a way it's dynamic process, isn't it? So it is partly to do with obviously the parameters that the coach is setting, but it's also to do with the action that the coachee, if you like, takes. So what happens, Sue, if you find that you're working with somebody who isn't taking action? And who comes to you must have had that experience, I would imagine.
Oh God, yeah. But the thing is, when I've had that experience, it's the richest learning experience of all. I mean, I had a call with a client this morning, and she hadn't completed her coaching prep form. We had a whole coaching session. It was super rich on the back of that as to what stopped that. A really old pattern. We coached it. A really old piece came out. You know, so for me, if someone isn't doing the work, not from a place of judgment, from a place of compassion and learning for the client, you know, I would ask, so I'm curious, you haven't done that. What stopped you?
Yeah.
What got in the way? And that is what you coach.
Yes.
Because how a client shows up with me is not in isolation. That's how they show up in their life.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, I'm holding their whole life and what they want for it. It's like, how is this serving you? Where does this stop you? Where does this get in the way? So something as simple as not filling out a prep form,
Yes,
can really show up a whole big picture.
Yes.
Going on.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So let's talk about, the one-to-one versus one-to-many model, Sue, because that's, as you said, a lot of clients, and you said that you got to that place as well, got really burnt out on just serving too many clients and just being completely fully booked and just being on that treadmill or that roller coaster of just one client to the next, to the next, to the next. So have you, do you sort of look back on that time now and say, well, there are things that I didn't know at that time that I know now and that I do differently? And do you serve one-to-many, and do you also work one-to-one? And how do you actually manage that ecosystem, if you like?
Yeah, I do both. I love one-to-one. And I have looked at scaling privately, but it's not my thing. It's not my jam. I've thought about it so many times, nearly made myself do it, done my own work around it, and it's not my jam.
Yeah.
But so I do one-to-one, and I love it. It's my sweet spot. And what I've been doing for the past couple of years, I've got a business partner, Anne Taylor, who we trained together 13 years ago.
Right.
We deliver group programs together. And that I love, because we're holding a group together. So we have our co-designed relationship. We have that. We vibe off each other. We're very different. We've got crossovers in terms of what we love. So we're into science, emotional intelligence. And we hold groups together through a process. And that's my big thing. I love holding someone or a group in a process. Where you get that richness and you follow them on that journey, and they do go away and do the work, and then they come back and they've learnt that, and then you're doing some, it's so I do both, is the short answer.
Yes. So your focus is leadership, isn't it? Is that personal leadership and corporate leadership as well? Is it kind of the full spectrum?
Yes, I do one-to-one leadership, coaching and group programs with Anne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what made you attracted to the topic of leadership and made you want to specialize in that area or niche down?
Yeah. What it was I was getting more and more private clients that were coming to me, and it was turning into leadership coaching. So it was like a natural evolution, and that's what led me to deal with my own fears. I was like, I could be a corporate coach. I'm not corporate enough, all that imposter syndrome stuff. That's what led me to face it, deal with it. It's like, wow, I could do this because I am doing it.
Yeah.
But it was that. And I love doing the leadership stuff because actually it's similar stuff. It's very similar because I'm working with the whole person.
Yeah.
It's not in isolation, you're a leader with a suit on. It's who you are as the whole person.
Yeah.
I'm always working with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, having been a leader myself, I managed organizations. I mean, I was really technically a leader from quite early on in my career because I was more of a sales leader and a commercial leader and a business development leader. And then eventually I became the leader of a business. So I pretty rapidly, I was kind of accelerated sort of through the ranks, and I was in that place of separation. And that was often quite painful for me because I found that when you are a leader, of course, you stand apart, don't you? So you're not in the pool with everybody else. You don't necessarily always have those kind of colleagues or those, that nice kind of group around you. But you are the person that's making the decisions, and that sometimes those decisions are unpopular, and then you get disliked. Do you find that with the clients that you work with corporately, do you find that they struggle with that sense of isolation, disconnection, loneliness? I mean, I could say that I definitely felt all those feelings when I was working in those roles. Is it quite common, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say it's very common, and more so for men, because, and being massively overgeneralized, but unlike women, they don't have those close friendships so much. Talk the level we talk in our sessions. I had a senior the other day. We talked about something very intimate that he was going through, and he said that he doesn't talk about this to anyone else because there is no one else to talk to.
Yeah.
That is really sad.
It really is, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's something that as women we often take it for granted, don't we? Because I don't feel as though nobody has ever told me not to talk about my feelings to anybody. I mean, like, nobody's ever told me that. I was just like, well, okay, I'm just gonna, because as women we grow up, don't we, with friends or sisters or whatever, and we just do this because nobody is telling us to be strong or be a man or bottle it all up or don't let it out or whatever. So we just do that, don't we? And I think that's like such an amazing kind of safety valve. And for some reason, and I don't know whether it's to do with the inherent makeup of men or whether it is societal conditioning, they don't tend to do that, do they?
It's completely societal conditioning. And when you come down to it, when you look at it and when you discuss it, because part of my work is about them being all of who they can be, and I'm going like that because it's about integration of who they're being. So that involves emotions as well as what they're doing. When you go into that, it clearly is conditioning, and it clearly is stronger in men. But it's interesting when you were saying that we had sisters and we were allowed, and not all of us. I was an only child. I was brought up in the military, so that was my experience as well. Was not to express emotions.
Okay.
I was told I was too sensitive.
Oh, really?
So, so it's not just men. Female clients I work with have been brought up in similar environments where they are made wrong or told not to express emotions. So yeah, I definitely see it more in men, and it was my experience, and it's quite a lot of women's experience, and it's all conditioning.
Yeah. So really, it sounds like a lot of the work that you do, it's to do with empowerment and freedom in a way, emotional expression, and owning perhaps aspects of yourself that you haven't been given permission maybe to own before. And I can certainly kind of resonate with that, because I think so many of us end up playing a role, don't we, in our lives, in order to not rock the boat, and just to please other people, and to be that, I think, particularly as women, to be that good mother, that good wife, that good daughter, that, good hero, really, a heroine. And I mean, I know that probably goes across the board, and that men feel an equal pressure, but I mean, we can't really escape it in today's society, can we? It's pressurized, isn't it? It's not easy for many people.
Oh yeah, I mean, the common piece that I work with a lot of senior leader women is about saying no. Not making everything all right for everybody else, doing everything for everybody else, and they're right at the bottom of the pile, and they end up absolutely frazzled, even in their very senior roles. So it's saying no and having healthy boundaries, being able to say no to somebody and say, actually, I can't do that because of X, Y, Z.
Yep.
So that's I would say is the main cause of stress and burnout in women, is that they're taking on everyone else's stuff as well as their own.
Oh yeah, definitely. And as women, we're often expected to be strong, and we're often expected to shoulder the burden, and I think particularly high achieving women, and I was one of them. Arguably I still am, but anyway, when I was in in a corporate environment, I do remember just that feeling of like, look, I just have to give it my all. I have to be permanently on. and then I have to go home, and then I have to be permanently on for my children, for my family, and just there is no time for me, no time at all. And I I don't have that now, but I do remember those days when my children were young and I was a single parent, and you know, I had this high flying career. And really just how lonely I felt, how lonely. Oh, that was it. Yeah. So it's amazing work that you do, Sue. So just having a look. So Richard says he's got a lot of women friends and male friends, and he talks to them about everything. He's always talked about his feelings and that he's in touch with his feminine side and energy as well as the masculine. Well, that's great, Richard. That's really good. But a lot of guys, they would not say that, would they?
A lot wouldn't. And what I'm definitely noticing is more of a want for it since lockdown. So, and more of a recognition of the importance of it, particularly around empathy in the workplace.
Yeah.
Particularly the male leaders I'm working with, really recognizing actually they need to be a bit more careful about their emotions and how they deal with things and people. So there is a shift around this that I'm seeing.
Yeah. So we've got another comment from Daniel, who says he's running a dog training business, and he's very good at what he does, and his clients call him a dog whisperer. However, training the dog is easy for me, but I find myself coaching and counseling the owners. It's their anxiety and lack of leadership that is causing problems with the dog. Now, that's an interesting, I probably, I resonate with that, with my misbehaving dog earlier on. So do you find that your clients sometimes, you know, they have challenges perhaps with their, let's just say, their animal friends as well as their children? So does this leadership thing, does it spill into their personal lives and as well as their business lives? Does it exist across the board, Sue?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'm working with the whole person. None of it, like I said earlier about that other client, none of it is in isolation.
Yeah.
Just not. You know, the way somebody shows up to a session, you know, the way they are in that session, the things that are just said, little fleeting comments, it's all there.
Yes.
You know, it's all linked. So I think he's definitely onto something. Maybe there's a little business in that piece, actually, because it is always, from my understanding, it is always about the owners, not the dog at all. So maybe there's something there.
Yeah, and you know, there is, and it's interesting because I know that in some respects I've trained my dog into the wrong habits. For example, when he goes out into the garden, and he barks in the garden, I give him a treat to get him back in, and so now he thinks that he has to
reward. He's getting a reward, so no wonder
he's getting a reward for barking in the garden. I know, and I think, well, do you know what? I probably repeated that type of mistake with my children many times, and my life would have been a lot easier if I had got advice from you, Sue. So
well, I don't know, you got someone else there who's a bit of a dog whisperer as well, remember?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. So Sue, what advice would you give to struggling coaches? Because I know that I speak to coaches sometimes, and I know that it is not easy right now, because a lot of people have you know, over COVID, obviously, there's been this whole, you know, issue with you know, the furlough. And there's also been, you know, people whose businesses have just, you know, they've crashed and burned, and particularly bricks and mortar businesses. So there must be like quite a lot of reinvention going on at the moment, and newbie coaches coming into the market who really just don't have a clue. They just do not know where to start, or they try and they're just not getting, they're not really getting anywhere. So what would be your, you know, your top 3 tips for people like that?
Well, firstly, my perspective would be very different. My perspective would be that there is never a better time to be a coach.
Yeah.
Because there is never a better time, and is it ever more needed than now?
Yes.
And absolutely, yes, there are lots of people whose businesses have failed, and there are a lot of people that have a lot of money in their pockets because of what they saved in the previous 18 months.
Yep.
So firstly, I would say, look at what your perspective is, what you're making up about what is going on out there. Firstly, it's all about your perspective. If you think it's going to be tough, it's going to be tough. If you believe people haven't got money, you won't find people who have money. Seriously, your perspective is the first thing I would say.
Yes.
The second is, oh, my lights just crashed. The second I would say is, as I did, find a business mentor, a coach who does mentoring, preferably, who is at a place where you want to get to, and work with them in whatever way you can, and that is feasible. And do due diligence, clearly. I mean, seriously, do due diligence around that, because as we've already heard, there are lots of, people who offer ridiculous promises. And the third piece is really take care of your well-being and mental health, because you can't pour from an empty cup. So really look after yourself, have time to think. I highly recommend a morning routine. I've been doing mine for about 5 years now. It's how I wrote my book. But more than that, it starts me off for the day intentionally. So I write 3 pages of morning pages. I write what I want for the day. I exercise. I sit and watch the birds I sit outside and watch the birds in my garden. I really intentionally start the day, really looking after my physical and mental health and well-being. That's what I'd say. And I'll add in another one. If you've got any self-belief issues, which we all have, you couldn't be a human being without having them, deal with that. Make sure you have a coach, therapist, whatever it is. And deal with your self-belief issues, because that is what will be the make or break.
I totally agree with that. And, I noticed the compound effect, I think, of those habits and that support in some of the people that are around me. And I notice consistently that people that don't reach out and get the help, or they don't incorporate those, if you like, those healthy habits and routines, they're just not, they do struggle with self-belief and confidence and faith, really, that faith that they can actually do it. So I think that's really amazing advice. Thank you so much for that. So Sue, you've written a book. Do you want to tell our audience about your book?
Oh yes, that's what I wrote. That's one thing I did in my morning routine. So I wanted to, I had a goal about, I don't know how many years ago now, 6 years ago, and I wanted to get all of the tools and the information that I'd learned on my coaching journey out there into the general public, because it's the kind of stuff that's not taught in schools, and I highly believe it should be. So I set about writing my book, and it's called Change Your Life in 5, and it's about creating meaningful changes in your life. And it recognizes 5 major steps, which are clarify, so get really clear on what it is you want, and that's often the toughest bit. Conquer, which is about conquering those fears, self-belief, all those limiting beliefs that hold you back, the fear mainly. Choose, and that's about your perspective. So I've talked about perspectives a couple of times, so you can really choose how you think, feel and behave towards anything. That blew my mind when I learned about how to do that, and that's in the book. There's a great exercise called the choice room. It's fabulous. Fourth is celebrate, and that was the newest chapter I wrote of the book. So important, and that's about self-belief and imposter syndrome and not feeling good enough, because that's been my journey. And as I say, I think if you don't crack that, you might as well forget the rest. And then the 5th chapter is commit, and that's all about self-care, well-being, mindfulness, and putting all of the things in place and saying no, things like that, to make it all happen.
That sounds like some amazing tips that you have in there, and not just tips, they're strategies and habits, really, aren't they, Sue?
Oh, there's loads of exercises in there, visualizations, and they're also on my website. If you go through the book and you don't want to mark it in your book, there's a link on my website so you can get all of the exercises. They're all in there.
Yeah. So, I mean, typically, when people come to you and then a little bit further down the line, you've been working together for a while, what changes do you notice in them?
Yeah, I just had somebody post on LinkedIn today, and she said the biggest thing was that we cracked the self-belief right early on.
Yeah.
And as I said, was coming out of a situation that came up in the session. So I'm like a little bit of a, I'm very intuitive in how I work, and I pick up on all little signals or little throwaway things. So definitely self-belief, definitely that realization that you can choose the life you want, that you do have a choice. It doesn't have to be this, or you don't need to do this, or you shouldn't have to do this. So the choice piece, realizing that, is a revelation.
Mm.
And another piece is really tapping into your inner wisdom. So realizing that you have all the answers in here. And so my role as my client's coach is to ask the right questions to get them to get that wisdom out of them. And then they learn that, and we have a fabulous tool that we use that has them to connect with that. And that's in the book as well, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that sounds great. Well, I just wanted to thank you. It's been such a pleasure, Sue, to have you here tonight and to hear about all your wisdom and experience, the great work that you do with your clients and your book. So if people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, my website is suebelton.com. Simple, does what it says on the tin. So yeah, contact me via there. They can get in touch with me there. And the other thing is I do have a free offer on the book. So if they go there, or I've asked if you can type the link into the chat. I can't see your chat. They can get hold of my book for free, just for the price of a coffee. So just the price of P&P.
Well, tell me the link and I'll put it in there now.
I don't know it offhand.
No?
But if you go to my website, there's a drop down that says free book offer. It's all on there.
Okay, that's great. And we're going to put that on the podcast show notes when the podcast goes out as well in a couple of weeks' time. So, Sue, thank you again for joining us. It really has been such a great conversation. I've got so much from it myself. And I just wanted to wish you all the best. And, thank you for joining us on the Smart Connected group and across multiple groups and pages on Facebook, including your own. But it really was a pleasure to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Jane. Good evening.